Good afternoon, everybody. Here for the final session for today, our CFO panel, and I'm looking forward to what these expert CFOs have to say about the current banking situations, about the business forecast for the rest of the year, and then advice for aspiring CFOs to reach the C-suite. Got a good mixture of two public company CFOs and Stephen with private equity experience. So certainly if anybody has any questions, speak up anytime during the session. Want to make sure that we'll get all the questions answered today. So I'll introduce them, and then you can go into the details of your company and your experience leading up to the CFO role. So this is Stephen Russell with Chime Solutions, Alissa Vickery with FLEETCORR Technologies, and Bruce Hausmann with Interface. So Stephen, you want to kick it off with your background experience and tell us about your company?
I will. Good afternoon. Pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me and the panel. It's a real pleasure. My background is somewhat eclectic. I was an Army officer for a number of years. Went to business school after I left the Army. Wasn't quite sure what I wanted to do, and I went to large companies. Went to Ford Motor Company, then Pfizer, and ultimately Lucent Technologies, which was, for those of you old enough, a hot company 20 plus years ago. And that's how I got to Atlanta. I left Lucent in sort of before the telecom boom changed, and have been with sort of small or mid-sized companies ever since. It was through my connections with the PE world and the venture capital world that I sort of got lured away to become a CFO of a smaller company, and I found that I enjoy that. And it's a different experience than working for large publicly traded companies, but it's got its pros and its cons. The most recent company I've been with is a distressed situation. I joined them late last year. I knew the PE firm from a prior experience. And one of the things about the private equity world is if you do a nice job for the PE owners, they tend to remember you and then they ask you to help out going forward. And so they asked me to help out with this particular situation, which was again a $60 million revenue company, so sort of smallish mid-size. They weren't quite sure where things were because the financials were cloudy, to put it nicely. I brought in a small little team, a crackerjack controller who nearly knew what she was doing and was able to sort of help me figure things out. And in a short period of time, we were able to sort of come in there, restate the financials, figure out what was going on in terms of cash flow, which I will tell you from my perspective as a private health companies, cash and cash flow is the predominant metric which we use to measure things. So I've been there for the last several months, and we just sold. We needed to sell, but we just sold about 3 weeks ago. Still there, helping with the transition. Who we sold it to is another much larger company, also private equity backed. This one was backed by Bain Capital. I'm sure you've all have heard of that name. Also very well run, though.
Okay. Super interesting. It's so diverse, and I think that was like my biggest takeaway hearing you speak. But so my background, I started my career in public accounting. So I'll call it the classic come out of a big college program straight into the Big Four. I started at Arthur Andersen. The firm went away within like 7 months, and walked next door to Deloitte, and then spent the next 9 years serving clients in the audit space here in Atlanta. So I served clients primarily in financial services, like the Federal Reserve Bank of Atlanta, also on the payments side, like global payments, and then a little bit of manufacturing, so Shaw Industries, if you've heard of them, a little carpet manufacturer. From there, after about 9 years, I decided it was time to try something different. So I jumped over to one of my clients who I should have honestly known a little bit better about what I was jumping into, and it was private equity backed. It was in the process of being sold. And I immediately got a call from some Deloitte partners I had worked with, and they said, hey, there's this payments company in Atlanta. They just went public. They need somebody to come in and run SEC, run all the SOX stuff. They don't know what the Sarbanes-Oxley thing is, and kind of be a technical accountant. And I said, okay, I just left. I'm not really interested. But they kept calling, and so I said yes. And 12 years later, a little bit of the rest is history. The company I joined is called FLEETCORR Technologies. So at the time, it was 2010. company had just gone public. The company was about $300 million in revenue. Very small, not even a large accelerated filer at the time. We were a large accelerated filer within 12 months. So I had to figure out SEC for the very first time. The company went public basically on the back of the auditors. And then I came in, helped build up the department, create process, create systems and tools, build a department. And today the company is now $3.825 billion in revenue going into 23. So a phenomenal growth trajectory over that term. We grow primarily via organic growth and acquisition. It's a little balanced, but a little lumpy. The acquisition years can be really hard because even the small deals are really difficult. Oftentimes they're messier than buying a big company and trying to roll it into the fold. So over the course, was just asked to do more and more as I grew the department, as the company became larger. Started as the VP of Financial Reporting, rolled that into SVP roles, and then eventually the Chief Accounting Officer about 3 years ago. 8 months ago, my boss resigned and decided he was going to go be a CFO at a private equity-backed payments company. And I had no idea what I was walking into, so I go into my CEO's office, and he's like, "Do you want to be interim CFO?" I'm like, what? You're like, "Yes, your boss just resigned." I said, "Okay. Here's the transition plan," and I've been sitting in that seat ever since, owning both the interim CFO hat as well as my day job as Chief Accounting Officer. I'm happy to say we have announced our full-time hire, so I'll be transitioning back into Chief Accounting Officer, but hopefully in a bit of a hybrid role because it's allowed me to flex a different muscle sitting in the CFO seat of a public company. So we are in the S&P 500, Fortune 2000. It's big, it's complex, there's a lot going on, and it's been kind of a crazy journey.
It's great to hear your backgrounds. We all have a lot in common. I just encourage you to reach out to your colleagues. It's amazing what you hear what people do, how much commonality there is. Mm-hmm. That's a big fat job you've got. Congratulations on holding that down.
Appreciate it.
So I'm Bruce Hausmann, and I have 30 years of progressive finance experience. I started in public accounting, got my CPA license in California actually, and then I worked with 4 venture-backed companies in the Bay Area. I was part of the team that brought 2 public and helped 2 get acquired. And after my 4th startup, I was like, gosh, what do I want to do next? This is 2002 and the tech downturn. And my wife was pregnant with her first child. And I was thinking about changing gears career-wise. So I said, I've never done a big company. What do you think about that? And so that's what I did. And we moved to Southern California and I joined the Walt Disney Company. I was fortunate enough to get that job. And I was there for 7 years. In a segment controller capacity. At that time we were structured, we had 5 segments, and I looked after the interactive media group. We had global presence looking after basically new media assets for the corporation. It was a phenomenal experience because I got to see and do at a much larger scale what I was sort of doing in the Bay Area. Got to be a part of a ginormous SAP implementation. Got a lot more global exposure than I had previous to that. And my next career aspiration was to get my boss's job. And his name was Bruce as well. And I said, Bruce, how do I get your job? And he said, these are tough. There's a long line out the door if you want a job. Not saying you're not going to get it. It's just, you got to bide your time. You got to pay your dues. And then you have to obviously apply when they open up. And I got a call from a recruiter. And it was basically his job, but at a different company. And it was 10 minutes away. And so that's why I switched. And it was with Aramark Corporation, and I was CFO for at that time it was their uniform division, which became the DSD sector, which is basically all of the direct store delivery business. So we had 2 big businesses. We had the 2nd largest uniform business in North America and the largest office coffee and snack business in North America. 4,000 trucks on the road every day, manufacturing, 85 plants, a big complex operation, way more complexity than I knew I was getting myself into, to be honest with you. And I think that was cool because I was able to leverage a lot of the business transformation experience that I had seen at my prior company. And I was there for 8 years, and my next goal was to be a public company CFO. I wanted that top job, and that's what brought me to Atlanta. So 6 years ago, I picked up and moved from the Los Angeles area with my wife and 3 daughters, and we came here, and I joined Interface, which is a manufacturer of commercial flooring. This is interface product that you have right here that you all are looking at. We invented carpet tile. We invented the stuff that is under your feet. And then so this is our main product. We manufacture this on 4 continents. We about half of our business is in the US, half is outside the US. We're now a large company. We're $1.3 billion in revenue. We're public. We are an accelerated filer, or large accelerated filer. And we've really, I think one of the most interesting things that I've been a part of is being part of the team to really diversify the company. We've entered 2 new big product lines, luxury vinyl tile, which is, we've grown that business organically. Now our data says we're the number 3 player in that space. And then we did the largest acquisition in the company's history in 2018, which got us into the rubber flooring business, and we manufacture that as well. And so it's been a lot of fun. It's been fun doing M&A work. It's been fun doing, everything that a kind of a public company CFO does, and doing that for the first time. I've been doing it for 6 years now, and I really enjoy what I do. And I think the best part is, honestly, it's the people, and it's being part of the business and being part of a team that can help make things better every day. So thanks for having me here.
Thank you all for sharing certainly some interesting stories, and good to have some fellow CPAs up here too. So, and maybe in your situation, Stephen, with the distress situation that you were in, certainly with the banking turmoil that we've been through over the past month or two, what's your business done, or what have all your businesses done regarding banking situations, deposits, uninsured deposits, moving money around, and treasuries or more other insured type of products? And then on the credit markets, have you seen any changes there, tightening recently?
I'll start. I mean, I do see the credit markets tightening, especially for small and mid-sized companies, especially for those companies that are somewhat credit challenged. I see banks getting much more conservative, being much more picky about meeting the letters of the law with respect to whatever bank terms you have with them. Whereas, say, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, you might forget something or miss something, or you might be a little loose with respect to having hit a target with respect to covenants. And they might have overlooked that. Maybe they didn't even mention it, depending on how serious it was. But more recently, say within the last year, it's like they are no mercy with respect to you miss something, you are have crossed the line, and you have to ask for penance, and you have to go through the rigmarole of having to ask for forgiveness, having to pay the fees to have things restructured, or have new paper. Sorry, apologize. Hope you all could hear me. Sorry for those of you online. Again, the banks are much more hardcore with respect to meeting the terms and conditions of whatever facility you have in place with them. With respect to other bank failures, the company I'm currently with, you all saw that Silicon Valley Bank, which I knew several of the people and bankers here in town as well as elsewhere. The first series of questions that came to me right after the news broke about Silicon Valley Bank being in trouble was, do we have any accounts with SVB? And if we did, can we pull it, or is it too late to pull it? Fortunately, we did not have any accounts with SVB. We had enough issues as it was. We actually are working with Bank of America, which I'm surprised that we have such a large bank working with a company of our size, but we are fortunate in that regard.
Sure. So I was remiss in not mentioning what FLEETCORR actually does. We facilitate B2B payments effectively. So that can be in a couple of different ways, but about a third of our business is in a space we refer to as corporate payments. And so think about this in the context of, we'll come in, we'll offer to take your entire AP suite of payments, and instead of your department making 5,000 payments a month, you can make 1 to us, and then we'll facilitate the outflow back to your vendors on your behalf, and we'll rebate a portion of that revenue back to you, because I'm going to monetize it on a virtual card. And so this is sort of big in the market today, I guess, for outsourcing your AP or taking the back office function and making it a profit center, right? But because we're in that space, we take customer deposits, and a lot of them. And when I remember I was on spring break with my family, and I'm watching the ticker on the TV because my husband insists on having Bloomberg on no matter where we are. And I was like, oh, for the first time, I'm gonna pay attention for a minute here. And I immediately ended up on calls, same kind of conversations. Okay, where do we have risk? And as you guys know, it wasn't just SVB. It was that whole, we'll call it regional and super regional tier of banks that was getting just whiplashed by the market and was causing extreme concern as to whether or not was SVB alone in this situation. So we're making the calls, we're looking everywhere we have our cash, thinking about diversification risk. Did we have any concentration sitting in any one place? And I mean, the short of it is we're a pretty large public company, and we have the capacities with our facilities to where had we had a problem, we would have been able to cover it. However, you know, it was cause for concern for sure. And, you know, I guess just to add a little bit of something different, I think now on this side of a little bit of the mini crisis, it kind of feels like maybe the Fed did what they needed to do. They shored up the market. It seems like that's old hat and old news now. I don't know if it's, I don't feel like it's the top topic on Bloomberg anymore, right? And so it's interesting to kind of come full circle to the other side of the mini crisis, and hopefully that's where it remains. Diversification, though.
Would you like me to weigh in on that one, or you have another one?
No, sure, yeah.
I'm not sure. I mean, I'm not sure if I'm going to tell you anything you don't already know. The credit markets have tightened, to your point, and they're going to tighten further. And, you know, 80% of the lending to small and medium-sized businesses is done by local banks. So this Citizens Bank is like an SVB deal. That's not going to be good. I think the IMF, and I listened to the Goldman's top economist, and both of them concur that, you know, that'll probably cost the economy 25 to 50 basis points above and beyond all the Fed tightening that's already been done. And the Fed's, you know, probably going to do another, whatever, 25 or so bips in May, and then we'll see what happens after there. So what does that mean to us as financial people? That means, as always, we've got to be looking at 2 to 3 years ahead. That means that we need to be stress testing our balance sheets and our capital structure. And that means that if we think that we're going to be in a bad spot in 6 months or 1 year, the time to act is now. Because it's probably not going to get better for a while. It's not going to get cheaper, and it's not going to get easier to get capital. And so this too shall pass. Like I said, I've been doing this for a while, and I've seen a bunch of different cycles, but we're at the early end of the cycle. And so, you know, if you need capital, I just encourage you to lock it up suck it up and lock it up, the prices that you're going to have to pay and the terms you're going to have to deal with, and then work toward thinking ahead. How do we refinance this in 3 years? That'd be my best advice.
Yeah, so some good points, and you talked about with your working with a small and medium-sized business and having a relationship with Bank of America. And Alissa, you talked about the impact of the regional and kind of super regional banks, and some of the businesses I've worked with did pull out money from regional bank and move it to a large international investment management company. And so, you know, Bruce, you talked about it too. What's what are your thoughts on the money going to flow from the regional banks to the Bank of Americas, the JP Morgan Chases, and then we're going to have to be the small businesses are going to have to be dealing with those large banks?
It has. A lot of money has flowed. So
I agree.
But hopefully we can. Seems like it's stabilized a bit, but for sure, that's a lot of fund flows have.
I agree with that. On the other hand, you always have small and mid-sized banks that are more hungry than the big banks, and therefore they will seek to make better terms. Yes. So, you know, I think if you're looking at expanding your credit facility or getting additional credit, get out there and just make sure that whoever you're dealing with on the other side has a good reputation and, you know, has some standing in the marketplace. And at the end of it, for example, let's take Silicon Valley Bank. Silicon Valley Bank, a good bank, okay? They got whipsawed by a couple of things. One is rising interest rates, and they didn't really understand or think through the implications of what that meant for their own portfolio. So they got caught short. But at the end of the day, looks like everyone that was involved with Silicon Valley Bank is going to turn out, well, except for the owners, the equity owners, will do just fine. So I think we're at a point in the U.S. financial markets where, unless it's a no-name bank, I would think as long as it's a good, solid bank, you should be okay. And
I agree. I mean, the Fed backstopped that one pretty quickly.
Yes.
Right? And the Fed seems committed to keeping these banks in business for the depositors.
Right, right.
So on that point, do you think now that the Treasury has kind of opened up Pandora's box with the unlimited insurance, does that impact the larger uninsured deposits going forward?
It'll be interesting to see how that plays out. I mean, we talk about this internally a little bit. I mean, I think the stats are that somewhere around 95% of all deposits in the U.S. are actually uninsured.
Wow.
Because there are businesses.
Yeah.
And that was SVB's problem.
Right.
Their deposits were all small tech companies, a lot on the West Coast. They were unique in the space they served. They provided creative opportunities for those fintechs on the West originally, but then beyond that, to do things that the big banks wouldn't do. They just, whether it's not even that it was so risky as much as just creative, right? And I think it's a unique term in the banking industry, being creative. And so it'll be interesting to see how it plays out. Because I think part of our theory around the Fed, and curious what y'all think, but is they had no choice to step in. Because all the deposits of those individual smaller and medium-sized enterprises were at stake, which meant those companies would have also potentially failed. You can't make payroll, you can't pay down your debt, whatever the next thing is.
Yeah.
You know, when I was in the Bay Area, because I did startups for 13 years, it was either Silicon Valley Bank or Imperial Bank. That's all who would talk to me to go and get capital for equipment financings, or lines of credits, et cetera. Because I was working with anywhere from pre-revenue companies to companies that were quite small and they were venture-backed. JP Morgan and Bank of America wouldn't do business with us. So to your point, I think that the small and regional banks, they have a place and they have a role in raising capital for small and medium-sized businesses. If you go to a heavy ag area as another example, you know, that local regional bank will lend to the farmers versus the big JP Morgan won't. So all these different folks have different play different roles in the economy, and I don't think that's going to go away because the big banks right now, the JP Morgans and BVAs of the world, are not positioned to do that, and you know, that's not there will be a void. To your point, this is a free market, and someone's going to figure out how to go and get that business because these small to medium-sized banks need that business, and they're going to figure out how to service it. So,
Yeah, good point. So you're talking about the economy, and you mentioned how the tightening you think puts, I think you said 50 to 75 points on the
basis points, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So, talking about for the rest of the year and business forecast, what are your businesses? And I know y'all are public companies, so obviously, we're not trying to get any public information here. But what are y'all looking at for the rest of the year?
We're looking to grow. Once we get the dust settles on some of the things we've been working through. But we see that if you have a good business proposition, you're either adding additional feature functionalities to something, or got additional features or benefits, or you're lower cost. Hopefully you have a solution that customers like and they'll buy more of. And I think irrespective of how the overall economy is doing, if you're not really growing, it's an issue. And so, companies that have something good to offer will grow through thick or thin. It's just that if it's thin, you have to be more careful with your costs because you can get tripped up. But the bottom line is you have to figure out exactly how can you deliver your product or your service at a price that makes sense for you and is economically sound. And hopefully you're growing.
So, there's not a lot I can say publicly, obviously, because we're trying to close down the quarter and release earnings. But, I would say generically, in our business, we're a recurring revenue business. We retain about 90% of all the revenue that we have from the prior year into the current year. And so our model is we continue to invest in sales. You get about half of prior year sales in the future year, half of current year sales this year. And so we invest at sort of the optimum level to ensure that at least as long as the product is steady and stable, that we should continue to grow at about a 10% organic revenue tick a year. So I would say, think we're all hopeful that the economy stays stable, and we'll see what the rest of the year holds. But we kind of feel okay about it right now.
Well, I'm not an economist, but I will say this, that it's been a rare moment when there's been this much uncertainty. And none of us have ever seen a time in our lives, our parents' lives, or our grandparents' lives when $5 trillion was juiced into the economy, followed by this fast and this rapid of economic Fed monetary tightening in such a short period of time. And so we're working through that as a U.S. economy, and frankly, as a global economy. So while the U.S. was more aggressive, the global economy did the same thing. Europe did the same thing, and a lot of countries in Asia did the same thing. So the whole globe is going through that big swing, and this is going to take some time to work through. And so I think that, everyone works for different companies and different services and does different things. And the way that we think about it is that, do we have a growth plan? Absolutely. That's what we want to do. We also have another plan that says, hey, what if it's just sort of like, call it slow growth or not so much growth this year? And do we have a recession plan? Absolutely. And so we are ready, depending on where things kind of move, to execute on those different scenarios. And as financial people, that's our job. That's our job, is to work with whoever it is, our CEO or our COO or the operators, and say, hey, what happens if revenue does this? What are we going to do? What happens if revenue does this? What are we going to do? What happens if revenue does this? What are we going to do? Because all three of those have different challenges, and you really want to think through and model that out. And you want to model out, back to cash flow, you want to model out the income statement, balance sheet, and cash flow, and make sure that you're crisp on what that looks like so that you know how to activate your operational plans.
Well, you said you're not an economist, but you sure sounded like a good one.
Definitely not one of those.
Yeah, well, on that, so at a macro economy level, when you're talking about your growth playbook and your recession playbook, when do you figure out when it's time to play the growth?
Pull the trigger?
Yeah, the growth one or the recession one from the macro level.
I mean, I think it's back to making sure you have leading indicators in your business. And they're different for everybody. I mean, we have a leading indicator scorecard. It's a bunch of different metrics. And we're looking at them, it's like a heat map, because none of them are the telltale sign of any specific direction, but we're looking directionally at what all of those sort of say. And there's a few other things. There is a report I look at every single week, like clockwork, every Tuesday. And so it's a little bit of a pulse of the business, as well as sort of a general macro heat map. Actually, there's some external and some internal data there. And I think I just encourage you, if you don't have one of those for your businesses, to get one. And it won't be perfect, but it at least gives you a feel for, and then you talk about as a team, hey, when do we pull different triggers depending on what this thing is telling us? And it gives you it gives you data, and it gives you something solid to respond to and have a conversation and dialogue around versus emotion. Like, gosh, I think it's really bad, or I think it's really good. It gives you a solid piece of information to have dialogue around.
Any your thoughts on the macro level?
I think you covered it pretty well.
It's not a lever though. It's not like it's off on. It's
let's say the heat map gets really red.
It's
Then
linear.
you're like, okay, we're going to pull this lever. Let's say the heat map is kind of yellowish green. Okay, we're going to pull this other lever.
So there's multiple levers.
Yes, exactly. I talk about it in terms of three different things: growth plan, very moderate growth plan, and downturn plan. The reality is it's probably more like a sliding scale. So, yeah.
Fascinating.
Okay, great. Thanks for those business levels. So changing over to more the softer side. So Alissa, it sounded like you got the role, pushed to you, and Bruce, you were aiming for your boss's role. What advice do you have for folks in the audience about getting to the CFO level of the C-suite?
Well, the advice I would give is really for almost any role, which is, what is the problem? What are the problems that you're trying to solve? I mean, we're brought in to help somebody. However the organization is structured, however it's set up, you know, the mission, there's a mission there. The company has a mission, the organization has a mission. People may be confused about it, but your job or your part of it is to figure out what is the overall thing and then to help solve whatever the problems are. And sometimes those are little small, minute problems like, you know, this, that, or the other, or like what are the bigger problems that you can help solve. And if you can do that, and this is what advice I'd give to a 20-year-old, well, a 60-year-old, is if you can help people solve problems and help them, then you are creating value for them and for the organization. So if you can, try to show a way, you know, without betraying, you know, your own principles and so forth, but, you know, how do you make things work, make them work better? And people will value that, especially if you're in a good organization, and people will see that you can do things, and they will want you to come and do more things, and you'll get more. And there's that old saw about, you know, you give more and more to, you know, the workhorses. Well, it's because, and I'm sure you've seen that yourselves, is, you know, people that can help you, you know, you give them work because, you know, you have, you know, so much time in the day, and you need to get stuff done, and, you know, you need to get it done. And so you yourselves look for people that can help you. Do the same thing for others.
Maybe I'll listen next, just because I want to hear what you both have to say.
Yeah. Well, I guess first, pretty basic stuff, right? Know thyself. What do you want to do? Where do you want to go, right? What do I want to do? And because it's different for everybody, right? And once you sort of like internalize that and think through that, then you can map out a path of what do you want to do and where do you want to go. And I agree with what you said. Boy, if you, for example, if you want a job like ours, number one rule is when people want to give you more, you don't say no. You take it on because you're trying to get more experiences, right? I need to know about treasury. I need to know about accounting. I need to know about tax. I need to know about risk management. I need some system implementation experience. I need to know how to navigate and work with the board. I need to know how to pull decks together and presentations. I need presentation skills to be able to present that material, all that stuff, right? And so people will give you opportunities, and you just say, yes, I'll do that. I'd like to try that. And will you mess up? For sure. Gosh, I've messed up so many times, it's not even funny. But you know, you get an opportunity to give it a try. So that's one thing. And then when you get the opportunity for coaching, bring it, just accept it. And you'll get a lot of feedback. And it doesn't mean that it's all right? But you can say, hey, I think those 3 things I'm gonna work on. And the rest of that, I'm either gonna ignore some of that for now, because maybe you don't agree with it, or maybe you're like, I just can't take all that on right now. But when you get good feedback, find a good coach and find a good mentor and take that on and say, I'm going to work on those 2 things that this person said I should work on. And I think if you do that, you'll get where you want to go. And it's magical stuff. It just sort of happens. Every company and every organization, whether it's a business or a church or a school, is always looking for good people. And so just encourage you to go for your aspirations. Know what they are and go for them.
So it's really interesting to hear you guys talk about it. I mean, I was sitting in the chief accounting officer seat, and it's, you know, I would say a year before my sitting CFO decided he was going to go try something different, he actually asked me, what do I want to do? Do you want my job? I'm like, oh, I don't think so. Not because of any other reason than I just, for whatever reason, wasn't picturing myself in that seat. He's like, I'll do whatever you want me to do to help you. And it's like, oh, okay. And, you know, I didn't know that meant, you know, resigning, but okay, that's one way to the seat. But I think along the way, what was happening is we grew a lot. We got complex in a hurry, a bunch of different businesses, a lot of different operators. And the skill set I had developed was, how do I figure out what this thing is, where are its risks, what are the things that are working well, what's not working well, try to be part of the solution, whether that was with my internal audit department or, quite frankly, me from a technical accounting space, just to make sure that we were booking things correctly. But being part of the answer, not the problem. I think oftentimes as accountants, we think we deliver the no, and I think we do deliver the no quite a bit, but finding when you can say yes, right? And working with your business partners to help them solve the problem they didn't even know they were trying to solve for. And so it's little things like, hey, I'm negotiating a new partner contract with this provider, and I really want to achieve this accounting outcome. Well, I can help him a lot more on the front end while he's negotiating the terms than I can if he just delivers me the signed agreement and I'm like, ooh, did you know you signed up for this? What? That's not how I modeled it. And I'm like, oh, that's a problem. I can't get to yes now. But if you work with me and you partner with me along the way. And so I think what happened is I just kind of became a trusted advisor within the organization while still delivering the SEC results and being behind the scenes on all the investor relations stuff, long before I ever had to sit in the seat or get on stage and speak to the numbers. And so I like the advice. I think it's figure out the things that you don't know as well and dive in if you can. Find the opportunities to learn and grow. Like for me, all throughout this process, it's been treasury.
I want to follow up on that.
Like soaking it up, trying to learn more, right? So I guess that's my advice is be a business partner, not just the accountant. Figure out how to be part of the solution, and ultimately people will see it. People get it. And then I like the coach idea, because I did have a coach, which I didn't know was preparing me for the seat, but she totally did. And now I have to figure out what happens now, because it's been 8 months in a role where, quite frankly, I really liked it. Now, I wear a lot of hats, and I'm Taylor Swift. Nobody's seen me for months, but I'm trying to figure out, like, what's next? And working with my new CFO to see maybe it's just a hybrid version of what I'm doing today.
I'd like to build on that. It was a couple of practical examples where I am right now. I mentioned that I had a crackerjack controller, very good. She has told the organization, however, several times, many times, no. And they need to be told no, but they're not used to it. So I've spent a fair amount of time myself going in behind her and translating, trying to navigate broken glass and so forth. And sometimes it works, sometimes I still have to get my broom and sweep up broken glass. Someone, though, told me years ago a way to say no in a way that sort of turns things around. And I've used this as an example. I'll share it with you all. And that is, if someone says, can you go to the moon and get there by, end of the month? Don't necessarily say no. Say, well, yes, maybe, but here's what I need. Need a rocket ship, need a launch pad, need, blah, blah, blah. And, you sort of then, to her point, you're morphing from just saying no, because it can't be done, but to, well, yes, we can do it, but these are the things we need to do. And you have a discussion, and that sort of helps illuminate what really is going on behind the scenes. And then pretty soon the person that's asking you to go to the moon realizes that, well, probably not practical, okay? But they figured it out themselves as you just saying no, because no is the right short answer, and as controllers, you want to be efficient and crisp, okay? And I get that. And as a military officer, you want to be crisp. But sometimes you have to think, well, maybe you try to do what I would call sort of verbal jujitsu, okay? And you turn it around, and they come to the answer themselves, and you've just helped them get there. It takes more time, and if you are rushed, if you're in the cockpit of a plane, you may not have that luxury, but if you have the time, I would encourage you to try something like that, which is engage and say, well, have you thought about these different things? And you'll get to a mutual answer that maybe is more helpful. Because again, as you know, controllers have a reputation for being crisp and efficient, and especially with salespeople, they like to be all things to all people, as a general rule. You can help find a middle path. So that's what I would.
It's interesting, we all have so many common challenges.
Mm-hmm.
We talk a lot in our team about being a consultative business partner, back to your business partner. Consultative business partner. And what does that mean? It means you're not saying no all the time. It means you're being a consultative business partner. And when you have to say no, don't say that. Here's the word. Say would love to, but can't, and here's why. I've found that most people, not everyone, but most people on balance, if they're reasonable, they will, if you explain to them why, that they will go, okay, I get it. But if you just say no, then it kind of irritates them, right? Like, oh, this person's just being a jerk and difficult to work with. but if you explain now, I'd love to, but we can't do it because here's the accounting literature behind that, and we had to follow this accounting literature. 90% of the people out there's always that 10%, but 90% of the people out there will respect that. So.
And I'm just going to add one more thing because it came to me as you were speaking. I think oftentimes, especially as the issues get harder, we tend to speak accounting or we speak tax, and figuring out how to speak accounting as a second language or tax as a second language. And I literally refer to this with my head of tax and my technical accounting team. They'll send me like an entire interpretive guidance from EY. I'm like, no, that is not what I was looking for. I need you to tell me the answer, and make it simple. I said, you can cite the gap or the paragraph, but tell me the answer and tell it to me a way and that I can explain it to my mother and she will understand. And so if you can make it English, because I don't know how many of you have spouses or partners, but every time I try to start saying anything accounting, even though I think it's super simple, my husband's eyes like cross and I can tell I've lost him like at the 10th word. So English.
I thought he was the Bloomberg guy. Is he not invited?
No, he likes to watch Bloomberg, but no, he's an operator kind of guy. Yeah.
Well, verbal jiu-jitsu, I'll have to remember that one, Steve. Any questions from the audience so far?
I have a question. You had mentioned that when you were the chief accounting officer,
Still am.
that when your CFO said, hey, you're interested in this, you're thinking, no, not really. But then, obviously, you were forced into it. I guess you could have said no. But after you did it, you seem to like it more. And now you're trying to figure out your next steps. Why do you think, when you were chief accounting officer, that you're thinking, I don't think so?
I think some of it is you just get comfortable in the seat you sit in, especially when you've been somewhere. I've been at FLEETCORR for 12 years, so I kind of grew up in the org to some degree, and maybe I'd even like pigeonholed myself mentally that was the mindset. And honestly, a little bit of the fear of what being a public company CFO meant, like going to an investor conference and speaking to the business in a way that is accurate, for one, but two, provides value and encourages someone that they want to buy our stock. Like that's a completely different muscle. It's not something I ever did as an accountant, right? So I think some of it is that, and some of it is, I think as women, we oftentimes have a checklist. I did these 9, but I didn't do that 10th one, so I'm not qualified, right? I think it's just part of our nature.
The statistics in women,
It shows it, right? And so, whereas statistics for men will say, oh, they've checked 2, and they're like, oh, totally, I'm gonna apply, I'll figure it out. And so, just having the self-confidence that the self-confidence to go for it a little bit, right?
And can you talk just for a minute about, you said you had a coach, was that like an external coach, an internal mentor, and where that was in your development?
Sure. So it was about 4 years ago that I was introduced to the person that we use. We host a leadership development program, and my boss at the time, let's be fair, my head of HR was like, I think you would be great for this. You should get involved. It'll help you to hone sort of your next skill set, right? And figure out where your blind spots are. And it's a global-wide program, and what they did is they paired us with cohorts of individuals who I just didn't work with all that frequently. And so it forced diverse ideas and thoughts and feedback. So, because if a bunch of accountants get in a room, we'll probably talk a lot about accounting and things that we have in common. Whereas these individuals forced me to come outside of my box and really expand my lens, if you will, around how to see the business, how to think as an operator would, or how somebody down in Brazil perceives their role in a global U.S. public company organization. And so just little nuances, just to see, just like I said, put a different kind of hat on, right? So I think it started there, and then along with that program, we were offered coaching. You could do it at the time of the program and then carry it on. And the company sponsored it, and they kept it intimate in the sense that there were only 35, 40 participants at a time, and they had several seasons, like 3 or 4 seasons a year, where they would do the program. But just having that person who is completely, she's third party, she will not say anything that I share with her to my HR lead, even though my HR lead has hired them to serve in this capacity. And just somebody who is not part of your circle and your inner dialogue, right? Who can provide you thoughtware and outside guidance without knowing any of the other noise that might affect how I would conclude on my own. So I'm using her again.
Can I, and this isn't really directed at anyone, but you kind of all mentioned in your story about how you got where you are. It's kind of growth now sitting in the seat or being offered or called or presented about the job. And I think what kind of struck me when you guys were rattling off these numbers about how many $1 billion of revenue your company is making is the weight, and then also how SVP kind of folded, and then you're getting these calls. So thinking about the weight of that responsibility being in that seat. I mean, you're on vacation when I don't remember where you said you were, but how do you how do you prepare for that? How do you know that you think about the different families that are affected by any financial crisis, and knowing that you're going to be the guy, you're going to be the person that they call. Hey, let's get Matt on the phone. Let's figure out if we're diverse enough. How do you think about that the responsibility to the people that you oversee, more than just a job?
We repeat it for the online audience. So I think you're talking about how do you prepare for the responsibility when turmoil or issues come up, and the impact that it has on the people in the company's lives. Get some?
Yeah,
I mean, I'll speak to what we did. I mean, we immediately just got all the people who would be relevant to the conversation on a call and start talking about what it meant for our business. Okay, here's the things I think we need to go and just do a little homework, make sure we know where our exposure is versus where it's not, understand who might be next, just understand you don't have to go it alone. I think that is the biggest thing, because I think if you take all that on your own and on yourself, you're not going to be successful. And I would say if you don't have the right individuals in-house, because this is something instilled to me by a leader forever ago, you hire to your weaknesses. So always have the people around you that can help prop you up. So if we're a three-legged stool, I got one leg and I got a little bit of the other two, but they're a little short. So, I need somebody who can shore me up in those other areas so that when we all get to the table, we really have a diverse set of thoughts and ideas, which produce just an overall better outcome and a sharing of the accountability and the responsibility.
Good advice.
Anything to add, Steve?
I think I come.
All right, well, I think that was a good way to wrap up. So I really appreciate y'all taking time out of your busy day, and I know you're trying to still close the deal. Hopefully get it wrapped up. But yeah, thanks for your great experiences and sharing your thoughts with the group. So thank y'all.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Okay.